Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is so great to see you all out here in Fitchburg. So welcome to Fitchburg. I appreciate you all being here, and it's wonderful to see all your faces. Here. You've taken your time out of your day to come out here and share this event with us. But before I go on, I just want to let you know, my name is Janice Hughes, and I'm one of the commissioners out here in Fitchburg, and I am absolutely delighted to have this event here out in Fitchburg. And so thank you so much for being here. Before we start our program, though, I want to introduce a couple people. First of all, Jill McCone. She is the director of the center here and the senior center. So welcome, Jill.
Have you back up. I just want to welcome you all as well to our facility, and we're really proud to be hosting this event today, so I hope you enjoy it as much as we will.
And with this event, I have a partner, and many of you know this person, and that is Dina Wright, with the founder and the president of The Right Place.
I was getting ready to say good morning. We've been here since morning. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming, especially with the weather being as it is today. I really appreciate your coming out today. Ask you to stick around till the end of the program. We will be giving away some Juneteenth-inspired giveaways, and our keynote speaker, Dr. Charles Chuck Taylor, will be hanging around to sign books.
One last thing. Can I ask you to silence your phones, please? Okay, I really will appreciate that. And with that, Dina, you want to invite our MC up here today?
Yeah, so I'm sure many of you have seen him either on the 5 o'clock. Anybody see him on the 5 o'clock news? Okay. How about the 6 o'clock? Yeah, he's also on the 10 o'clock news. This guy is all over your TV. Please welcome our MC, Brandon Taylor from WKOW TV.
What an introduction. It's good to see everyone today. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here in Fitchburg and to be a part of today's event. Our program is stacked with a lot of great talent, and I can't wait to hear from Dr. Taylor as well. But I want to first introduce our songstress for our first musical selection. A lifelong singer and community advocate, she has spent more than 30 years helping others through public service, leadership, and outreach. Michelle Bozeman-Brown is a committee member that is, of the City of Fitchburg Housing Committee. She began performing at the age of 4 and has shared her gift of music through church choirs, school programs, and local events throughout her entire life. Today, she joins us in celebrating Juneteenth through the power of song. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Michelle Bozeman-Brown.
If you are able, please stand. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, and ring with the harmonies of liberty, and let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies, and let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the us march on till victory. Victory is won. Thank you.
Thank you again, Michelle, for that beautiful, beautiful rendition. You can hear the church choir. Yes! I grew up in the church in the South, and you can truly hear it, so we were blessed with that. Up next is going to be a presentation of the spoken word. Sarah B. is a poet, speaker, and community wellness advocate that explores healing, resilience, identity, and joy. Through spoken word, she weaves personal reflection and collective history, creating powerful moments of connection, remembrance, and celebration. Today, she shares an original piece written especially for this Juneteenth celebration. Please join me in welcome Sarah B. to the stage.
Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all. Sarah be me. I thank y'all for joining us today. Joy to us now and to our forever days, to you who sit before me and for those who walk the path before us, and for those still on the path to many joyous days. Under one roof, a celebration for us in all our ways. Oh, what a time to be here, with celebration and cheer, looking back over all of our accomplishments and the past and the years, noticing how many strides we made, claiming victory in each category we appear. They tried to strip us, but each time we appear. Each time remembering the sacrifices that was made, which brought us here to this day. Holding the torches of our loved ones, their light still finding the way. Tear us down, you say, but what is America without us? We carried the names of those who drink before us. You see, they built this space. Each time in every chapter, you tried to erase. Yet, here we stand, still taking up space, still creating, still building, still leaving a trace. Excellence written across generations, in our hands and in our hearts. In the many ways we continue to rise. Oh, what a time to be here. Now standing in moments they could only imagine. Standing in purpose, standing in power, standing in the beauty all that we are. Together, carrying yesterday, while creating a tomorrow. Together, honoring the journey, while celebrating how far we've come. Hope resting gently upon our shoulders, our stories resting gently upon our hands, honor resting gently upon our hearts. Oh, what a time to be here. Joy to us now and to our forever days. Happy Juneteenth.
What if the road to healing as a nation begins with finally telling the truth about our past? That belief lies at the heart of Roar Enterprises Incorporated, a family-led mission started in Madison, Wisconsin, dedicated to helping people understand the Black experience in America, not as a separate story, but as a powerful thread woven into the story of us all. Before we discuss Roar's significant involvement with Juneteenth, let's learn more about Roar's president and founder. Founded by educator, author, and filmmaker Dr. Charles Taylor, Roar Enterprises was born from a question that has shaped his life's work for more than 40 years. What happens when a nation refuses to fully tell the truth about itself? That question has led him into classrooms, communities, and conversations across Madison and throughout the nation. Because, as he says, the truth matters.
I believe we're all connected, but somewhere along the way, we lost our connection. If we want to heal as a nation, I believe one path forward is the hardest but necessary one: to face our past honestly and to repair what was broken.
Through books, films, and educational programs, Roar provides powerful learning resources that deepen cultural understanding, promote unity, challenge racial assumptions, and celebrate cultural traditions like Kwanzaa. For much of its history, Roar, formerly Praxis Publications, served colleges and universities, helping recruit and retain students of color and supporting their journey to graduation.
I did this work for many years on weeknights and weekends in the 80s and 90s. And even with a full-time job, I made time because our students mattered and needed advocates.
Roar grew into a trusted publishing voice, producing essential resources for campuses nationwide. That work led to invitations to speak at over 100 colleges and universities in the 80s and 90s. But Dr. Taylor knew that some stories become even more powerful when audiences can see them on the big screen. As a result, Roar's work extends beyond books to award-winning films and documentaries. Decade of Discontent captures the struggle for justice and civil rights in Milwaukee, a story too important to forget. Leaders of Madison's Black Renaissance honor the visionaries, artists, and trailblazers whose influence continues to define and inspire the Madison community.
Is there really a renaissance taking place in Madison? Or as Betty Banks suggests, is the jury still out? We'll let you decide by introducing you to dozens of Black trailblazers committed to making Madison a better place for everyone.
And for children, there is Roar, the musical, a story born from love and family. This magical fairy tale began as a stage play at Madison's Overture Center and later became a short film dedicated to Kemet and Maureen, Dr. Taylor's grandson and godchild. Young audiences learn a valuable lesson. Our lives matter, and every one of us belongs.
What do the villagers say about me, Bitty Bitty? Are they afraid of me?
Well, some call you a dusty butt.
Dusty butt? Yeah, but you probably think I'm weird, and I stink, right?
I never met anyone quite like you. You're unique in all that you are. You're my biggest best friend.
Dr. Taylor also turned to storytelling through books to explore the tensions, fears, and possibilities surrounding race in America. In his novel, Lakeside University Cover-Up, a campus on the brink of a racial explosion becomes the backdrop for an unforgettable story. When racial tensions reach a breaking point, campus leaders turn to Dr. Wendell Oliver, the nation's leading voice on healing division. When Dr. Oliver takes students on a weekend retreat meant to heal, students discover a hidden campus cover-up, one that pulls them into a web of mystery, risk, and revelation. Lakeside University will never be the same. Among Dr. Taylor's proudest works are his biographies of two Wisconsin leaders, Dr. Carmen Porco and Dr. Archie Ivy. Their lives showcase what courage, service, and community leadership look like in action. Their stories remind us that leadership is not a title, but a calling. But perhaps no chapter of Roar's story speaks louder than its commitment to Juneteenth. Dr. Taylor's books helped shape national understanding, contributing to the movement that led to Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday. For Dr. Taylor, Juneteenth was never simply about a holiday. It was about America finally confronting the unfinished story of freedom.
Juneteenth is not just a celebration. It's a call to value freedom, to continue the work of justice, and to replace false stories about Blacks with the truth.
Dr. Taylor began confronting myths that shaped generations of misunderstanding.
When people believe myths about Black history, they carry false beliefs about Black people, beliefs that have fueled systems of inequality and pain. Myths about laziness were used to justify unfair labor systems and generations of unemployment. Myths about criminality justified discriminatory laws and the mass incarceration of Blacks. Myths about inferiority justified unequal education and segregation.
But when truth enters the room, everything changes. That's why Dr. Taylor created the Truth Seeker series, where a wise griot replaces myths with truths and celebrates the deeper meaning behind Juneteenth with facts that every American deserves to know.
I am the Truth Seeker, summoned by the unfinished promise of Juneteenth. Welcome to this original series, where I dismantle 31 myths about Juneteenth and replace them with documented facts. I have walked the dusty roads of Texas and heard the cries of those who waited for freedom's arrival. If you are ready to celebrate freedom with understanding instead of assumption, this series will provide you with all the information you need to grasp the true meaning of Juneteenth. Juneteenth is now celebrated across America. But what if much of what we think we know about Juneteenth is incomplete? Did slavery end everywhere on June 19, 1865? Or was freedom declared and delayed? Was General Orders Number 3 the order that led to Black liberation? Or did the order attempt to manage freedom the moment it arrived? Is Juneteenth new, or has it been preserved for generations by communities who refuse to forget? Is Juneteenth just cookouts, or memory wrapped in joy? Is it anti-American, or a call for America to live up to its promise? Was freedom immediate, or did emancipation require enforcement, protection, and courage? Did recognition of Juneteenth just happen, or was it built through decades of organizing? Is Juneteenth finished because it's federal, or is it still a task before us? In this series, you will get the answers you seek. 31 myths, 31 corrections, one powerful question. Are you ready to celebrate freedom honestly? If you believe freedom deserves more than a headline, this series is for you.
And through it all, giving back has never been optional. It has been a way of life. Dr. Taylor, who lost his mother at age 5, says he is eternally grateful for the opportunities he was given. And giving back is part of his DNA. For more than 30 years, Roar has freely shared books, films, and insight, opening the door for more people to engage with and celebrate African American culture. So, where does Roar go from here? Dr. Taylor often jokes that the community won't let him retire, but he has promised his family that he will pass the torch this year and begin a new chapter. As the torch is passed to the next generation, the mission remains the same: truth, service, impact. Perhaps Dr. Taylor sums it up best.
The work of truth is not the work of one person or one group. It's the work that we must do together, hand in hand and heart to heart.
And perhaps the greatest measure of a life's work is not what we build for ourselves, but what we leave behind for others to carry forward. Because when truth roars, the future listens.
All right, please join me in introducing and welcoming our keynote speaker, Dr. Charles Chuck Taylor.
We thought we were so cool. We thought we were so hip. My friends and I were all 16 years old in the summer of 1966 when Bobby Williams came to our town. Although many people have influenced my life, it was Bobby Williams who taught my friends and me about our history and culture. Bobby Williams and his young family drove into our hometown of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, in a brand new, shiny black Chrysler. He was only 24 years old and the first college-educated African-American male director of our community center, and he was from St. Louis, and we thought we were cool. Before he arrived, chasing girls, playing sports, and finding a summer job were all that we cared about, and in that order. We were in Falstaff Field playing tackle football, and Bobby asked to join the game. After he scored a touchdown, we looked at him a little bit more differently because he knew something about the game. He mapped out a pass route that we hadn't seen before. We thought we were so hip. Hey, I got a book you guys should check out, Bobby said. It was summer, and booking was the last thing on our minds, so we just laughed it off. He knew each one of us claimed to be the Six Temptations, and he had an 8-track in his car blasting My Girl, although Lou Rawls' Love is a Hurting Thing was his favorite song. He only had to ask once if we needed a ride home, and 8 guys would pile into that shiny new Chrysler. We sneered at him when he asked us if we knew how to rap to girls, because at 16, hey, we knew we were players. But Bobby kept talking. Sweetness, a falling star, that's what you are, from the heavens above. I know to you I'm just a lovesick guy, but you're wrong. I need you. I want you by my side, so I'm going to keep on trying until I win your love. Why don't you try that and see what happens, Bobby said. Wow, we thought we knew how to rap. He capped our rap. Of course, it was only later that we learned that his rap came from a Temptation song. Have you guys ever heard of Martin Luther King, Bobby asked? How about the brother minister who was assassinated last year, Malcolm X? Check out his autobiography. This time, we listened a little more carefully. Back in the day, money was available from President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty programs. So Bobby got some of us jobs in the community center. And one of the first things he had us do was create a library. He brought in books about black culture and history that we had never heard of before. We learned about African kings and queens and places that we didn't even know existed. Bobby would come to work sky clean every day, what we used to call styling and profiling, wearing Italian bandline shirts, Stacey Adams shoes, and a brim that was way cooler than what our fathers wore. And we thought we were cool. We started having discussions about poverty and racism and why there weren't any blacks on the school board or city council. We didn't pay much attention to it at the time because we felt the civil rights movement was happening somewhere else. But Bobby made us realize that it had to happen in our hometown too for it to have any meaning. He frightened the town leaders by insisting that the Bill of Rights should apply to everyone. He told them that the most important part of the Pledge of Allegiance was the part that said, with liberty and justice for all. Bobby told us that America could offer us more than dope, jail, or the military, and he challenged us constantly. Bobby led marches, and he forced people to take sides. It didn't take long for him to be viewed as an outside agitator and our hometown's #1 public enemy. A few years later, he was sent to prison on a trumped-up concealed weapons charge, a gun he legally purchased to protect his family after numerous death threats and a shooting into his home. I know because I was Bobby's chief witness at his trial. And I don't know if Bobby is still alive today, but I realize how grateful I was for the time he spent in my life and all the lessons that he taught me. I was able to use those lessons 10 years later when I became director of the community center. Looking back, I knew my friends and I were never the same after the summer of 1966. We grew up that summer because it no longer mattered whether we were cool. Thanks, Bobby. Word. Now, my love of history began with Bobby many years ago, and my Juneteenth book, The Promise of Freedom, allows me to share and preserve our history at a time when Black history is under attack. Books are being banned. Politicians are rewriting the past to say slavery wasn't that bad. They say we should move on and that teaching the truth is somehow divisive. But when they ban history, they bury our truth. And without truth, freedom becomes more than just a promise. Besides, if they ban the truth from our schools, we will teach it in our homes, our churches, our museums, and our community organizations because our history is too consequential to be erased. Would you agree with that? Amen. Today, I want to discuss the significance of Juneteenth and the broader African American journey, from Africa through enslavement to the ongoing struggle for justice. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge my late friend, Dr. Ronald Myers. Some of you may have known him when he was alive. He is the founder of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation, and this is the organization most responsible for Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday. Doc traveled this country for more than 30 years in his pickup truck, advocating for Juneteenth's recognition. Before his death, he helped secure the passage of Juneteenth as a state holiday or observance in 43 states and Washington, D.C. And Doc would give each governor who made Juneteenth a state holiday or observance a copy of my first Juneteenth book, even to Sarah Palin. Alongside Doc stood Miss Opal Lee, the grandmother of Juneteenth, whose historic walk from Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C. helped inspire Congress to finally make Juneteenth a federal holiday. And Doc often reminded us that you cannot truly understand Juneteenth without understanding Black history and the legacy of slavery. And what he meant is that sometimes we must look backward in order to move forward. And that is why my book, Juneteenth, The Promise of Freedom, does not begin our story in chains. It begins in Africa, the cradle of civilization, where humanity took its first breath. Before the horrors of slavery, there were kings and queens, scholars and builders, architects and philosophers. That's our history too. And it's time we teach it as it was, not as it has been distorted to be. To begin Black history with slavery is to erase the greatness that came before it. Historian Frank Snowden reminds us that there was a time before racial prejudice when Africans were among the most admired people on the planet. The Greek poet Homer called Ethiopians the favorite of the gods. Greek scholars like Plato studied in Egypt. Africa influenced the ancient world in profound ways, but after the European conquest, Europeans rewrote history. Africa's contributions were stolen, hidden, or completely erased. Yet, the evidence remains. Africa led the world for thousands of years in commerce, architecture, navigation, education, and culture. Long before Columbus, African civilizations were flourishing. Professor Ivan van Sertima, author of They Came Before Columbus, says, "It is not necessary for us to create new myths about Africa. The truth itself is more astonishing than any myth we could create." And when people migrated out of Africa, they left their footprints across the globe, from India to Australia to the Americas. Dr. Sujan Das, author of When the World Was Black, says there are over 10,000 Pacific islands inhabited by Black people. So no matter how much ice piled up during the Ice Age, you need a boat to reach the Pacific Islands from Africa. This meant that Africans built ships. And as my book points out, if they could sail to Australia, they could sail to America, Mexico, and Europe. We now know that long before Columbus was born, African kings sent numerous ships to explore the world. Historical records confirm this because young scholars using archaeological, linguistic, genetic, skeletal, anthropological, and primary source data are providing a clearer picture of this window into our past. And oh, what a story that is emerging. And someday, this new discovery of old knowledge will be known by the public and taught in our schools. At least that's my hope. In fact, the further we go back in history, the blacker it becomes. African migration is not a fringe story, it is the main story. If it's true that Africa is the birthplace of humanity, why not start our history classes there? Teach about the ancient migration out of Africa, and then add other strands of the human family as they arrived on the scene, instead of pretending that civilization started elsewhere. The truth matters, because when humanity is disconnected from its African roots, we become disconnected from one another. That's why I wrote my Juneteenth book, to help tell the story we were never taught, to uncover the truths buried beneath centuries of prejudice, to help our children and their children understand that their history is sacred and their identity is powerful. It's difficult to fix what's broken in our society if we don't fully understand how history has shaped our present circumstances. That's why it's critical that we start human history in Africa and understand how Africa went from such greatness to becoming the world's slaves. In Chapter 4, I document Africa's worldwide contributions before the existence of Europe. And in Chapter 5, I introduce you to some of Africa's greatest empires. Africa's wealth and prominence on the world stage drew foreigners to its shores, enticed by the lure of gold and other riches. Africa was home to the world's richest man, King Mansa Musa of Mali. Have you heard of him? Tales of King Mansa Musa's trek to Mecca and his display of enormous wealth became legendary in both Europe and the Arab world. It was this desire for gold and riches that led Europeans to Africa and ultimately to Africa's downfall. The slave trade devastated Africa, and Europe's insatiable need for labor to work in the New World required an unending supply of African captives. The Transatlantic Slave Trade Database says some 12.5 million Africans were shipped from Africa, with the Caribbean and South America getting the vast bulk of these. The voyage over left a trail of corpses too numerous to count. Nearly 2 million human lives are unaccounted for, lost at sea. Whatever the ocean route taken, conditions on board the slave ships were horrific. Africans were shackled in chains, stacked like sardines in the ship's hull, with less than 18 inches between the ceiling and floor, not enough space to sit up. One eyewitness testified in the British Parliament that they had about as much room as a man in his coffin. Those who died en route were thrown to the sharks that always followed slave ships. In fact, the term shark bait is a grim reminder of the sheer inhumanity and disregard for African lives. Although 1 in 10 slave ships experienced a rebellion, Europeans had superior weapons and forced Africans to their new land, which they call America. Despite the myth that Columbus discovered America, we know that advanced native civilizations were already here. There were millions of people in the Americas speaking over 300 distinct languages when Columbus arrived in the Caribbean. There were kings and prophets, governing councils and communal clans. There were fishermen, farmers, and buffalo hunters, weavers, potters, and rock painters, healers, spiritual leaders, builders, and teachers, and they were not savages. And now nearly all of these great languages and people are gone. That is Columbus's legacy. Dr. James Loewen, author of Lies My Teacher Told Me, said Columbus almost single-handedly enslaved more indigenous people than any individual and helped launch the international slave trade. The English colonists, when they settled America's East Coast, followed Columbus's lead and started enslaving natives to clear the land. Because diseases, massacres, and wars resulted in the deaths of millions of indigenous people, the colonists were forced to turn to two other labor sources. One, they decided to use the indentured servant system to bring white servants to the New World in exchange for their labor for 4 to 7 years. In fact, nearly 2/3 of the white population in the 13 American colonies came as indentured. Secondly, the Brits turned to Africa. Now, it is critical to note that in 1619, English law did not recognize chattel slavery. So these first Africans from Angola were treated as indentured servants, like their poor white counterparts. Now, we know this because King James I ordered a census of Jamestown in 1624 that listed the Angolans as servants. It is also important to note that this same census identified no race as white. Instead, they were listed by their status, servant, free, head of household, not their skin color. The ideal of whiteness had not yet taken root, and racial categories had not been formalized in the colonies. During the indentured period, poor whites and blacks had a unique bond based on shared oppression. Dr. Jacqueline Badalore, author of Birth of a White Nation, says British and African laborers worked alongside each other and lived under similar conditions from about 1620 to 1675. So for over 50 years, as a matter of law, she says they could own servants, could vote, and could marry British women. There were many interracial marriages during the indentured period. For a brief moment in our history, class differences may have been more significant than racial differences. However, this racial harmony was not to last, and the status of blacks would soon take a turn from which they have yet to recover. Bacon's Rebellion, which united black and white servants against the governor and ruling elite of Virginia, ended the indentured system for blacks. Let me explain. By 1676, it was estimated that 1/4 of Virginia's freeholders, these are black and white men who had completed their indenture, were without land of their own. These men petitioned the colonial government for assistance in acquiring land, even if it meant encroaching on more Indian territory. The ruling elite ignored their demands. As a result, hundreds of poor white Europeans and Africans united in opposition to the landholding elite and joined Nathaniel Bacon, who had broken from that elite. And when the colonial government failed to meet their demands, Bacon and his makeshift army marched on Jamestown and burned it to the ground. Unfortunately, Bacon died of dysentery during the rebellion, and the British sent in troops to squash the insurgency. The rebellion deeply alarmed the wealthy planters who saw the interracial alliance as a direct threat to their rule. Determined to prevent future alliances between poor whites and blacks, they responded by creating a divide and conquer solution based on race, and by doing so, officially introduced racism into law and customs. They introduced laws that explicitly establish racial hierarchies. Now, no matter how impoverished a white person was, their skin color alone elevated their status above that of black and other indigenous people. It is after Bacon's Rebellion that we see the emergence of the term white people. Professor Badalore claims that white people as a racial social construct did not exist until 1681, emerging precisely to justify the new racial hierarchy put into place after Bacon's Rebellion. Previously, white people were identified by their country of origin, such as France, Poland, or Ireland. She says any claim that white people are a separate race is a lie, and that whiteness after Bacon's Rebellion became a tool by which laborers could be divided. The rulers created a permanent labor underclass of enslaved blacks who could not seek relief from the law, while at the same time uniting whites, regardless of social background, into one ruling elite bound by skin color. So by the early 18th century, every Virginia county had a militia of landless poor whites ready in case of any sudden eruption of Indians or insurrection by blacks. Thus, poor whites were now used to police poor blacks. The rich planters effectively ended the class unity of poor people and replaced it with racial animosity that is still prevalent today. Just imagine if poor whites and blacks could have taken over Virginia back then. We'd have a different America today. Now, as slavery became defined by race, whites then passed laws making blacks chattel property. As such, blacks were sold, bartered, rented, deeded, used as collateral, and treated worse than animals. Frederick Douglass said, "We have worked without wages. We have lived without hope, wept without sympathy, and bled without mercy." Despite living under such inhumane conditions, blacks fought and died in every war for America. When Paul Revere rode through the countryside waking up Minutemen, he woke up black Minutemen as well. When George Washington crossed the Delaware River, blacks were in the boat with him. We've marched in every war, but when they signed the Constitution, they wrote that black lives were worth only 3/5 of a white person's life, embedding systemic racism into our Constitution. Until America confronts its history with honesty and urgency, the promises of freedom and equality will remain unfulfilled. We cannot heal what we refuse to acknowledge. The struggle for justice is not just about the past, it's about dismantling the structures that continue to oppress blacks and others today. That's why the past is still with us, but we must realize that as Americans, we are strong enough to face it together so that we can move forward together. Despite slavery's horrors, black people resisted. There were many slave rebellions and black heroes who fought for emancipation. Harriet Tubman, called Moses by her people, led hundreds of blacks to freedom. She said, "If you hear the dogs, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If they're shouting after you, keep going. Don't ever stop. Keep going. If you want a taste of freedom, keep going." And there were white heroes too. White allies stood alongside black abolitionists and freedom fighters. They were not saviors, and many stood on principle, knowing that silence in the face of injustice made them complicit. John Brown sacrificed his life at Harper's Ferry to ignite a rebellion against slavery. Levi Coffin, dubbed the president of the Underground Railroad, used his home as a safe house, sheltering more than 3,000 freedom seekers. Thomas Garrett devoted his life and fortune to helping enslaved people escape to freedom. Harriet Tubman said this about Garrett: "He was a man of truth, the friend of the slave, and I have never found his like in all my journeys." Their sacrifices were real and substantial. Both Mexicans and Native people provided refuge for blacks escaping slavery, yet history remembers them far less than it does the Confederate generals who fought to preserve slavery. This country erected monuments to men who waged war to keep black people in chains, but how many schools bear the names of the white abolitionists who risked everything to set them free? The erasure of these allies from mainstream history is intentional, starting in the Jim Crow era, because they don't want us to remember that when we united back then, we won. And we should never forget that the Underground Railroad was more than a pathway to freedom. It was a powerful testimony of people standing together during our darkest hour. The Underground Railroad was not just about reaching Canada or Mexico. It was about proving that oppression can be challenged and that justice will always have its warriors, a lesson that we must remember today. In addition to the brave resistance, blacks relied on the black church to help them get through enslavement. Our ancestors lived in a world where hardship never ceased and violence loomed at every turn, but the black church provided comfort and strength. It gave enslaved people the freedom to vent their suffering openly, processing their pain through spirituals, prayer, and testimony. These church gatherings were spaces where every soul was valued and part of a community that saw their humanity. Our ancestors sang not because they were free, but because they believed in freedom. The black church was born from the unyielding belief that no matter what chains men placed upon their bodies, their spirits remained free. It was this religious faith that enabled them to endure their bondage. Their faith sustained them through horrors we can scarcely imagine. Juneteenth honors that enduring faith that still inspires us to keep pressing forward for justice. The Civil War saw blacks fighting for their own freedom, and the colored troops excelled in battle. By 1864, President Lincoln called them his black warriors and admitted that the war could not have been won without them. He supported black veterans having the right to vote before he was assassinated. At the end of the Civil War, there were still enslaved blacks in Texas. General George Granger and the colored troops were sent to Galveston, Texas, where Granger read the proclamation freeing the enslaved. One can imagine the joy in the hearts of our enslaved ancestors. The record tells us that when they heard the news of freedom on June 19, 1865, the first Juneteenth, they alternately sang, danced, and prayed. There was much rejoicing and jubilation that their lifelong prayers had finally been answered. Many of the enslaved left their masters immediately upon being freed, in search of family members, economic opportunities, or simply because they could. They left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and hope in their hearts. Oh, freedom. But Frederick Douglass said, they freed us, but they didn't change their attitude about us. The Civil War may have ended slavery, but not anti-black racism. Ex-slaves, for the most part, were left to fend for themselves. They were, as Frederick Douglass said, freed without roofs to cover them, or bread to eat, or land to cultivate, and as a consequence, died in such numbers as to awaken the hope of their enemies that they would soon disappear. You see, there was no apology for slavery, no racial reconciliation commission to look into the horrors and atrocities of enslavement and repair the damage. Most of our ancestors didn't receive land, support, or protection. They were freed into poverty, surrounded by hostility, and excluded from opportunity. That's a historical fact that we can't ignore. And as a nation, we have never fully confronted the racial injustices that shaped our past or the ways they still influence our present. My book points out these harsh truths. Vice President Andrew Johnson, a former slave owner, became president after Lincoln was assassinated. Johnson allowed Confederate leaders to return to their old positions of power, and as a result, Reconstruction faced violent resistance. Even worse, Johnson's decision sent a painful message to the nation that even after all that blacks had suffered, and despite the hundreds of thousands of American lives lost in the Civil War, the South was unwilling to change or repent. The first laws the Confederates enacted during Reconstruction were called Black Codes. And these Black Codes prohibited blacks from owning property, conducting business, or buying land. Does that sound like freedom for blacks to you? Southerners accused blacks of being the reason that they lost the war. And the violence against blacks after the Civil War became so shocking that it led to the radicalization of the white North, who joined free blacks in calling for President Johnson to investigate the violence in the South. Despite horrifying evidence of mass black killings and blacks living in terror, Johnson refused to do anything about it. As a result, the Republicans, and please don't confuse them with the Republican Party of today, these Republicans who were called radical because they supported black rights, they introduced their version of Reconstruction over Johnson's vetoes. They divided the South into 5 military districts and sent federal troops to protect the rights of these newly freed blacks. And then they passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Reconstruction Amendments that abolished slavery, granted citizenship, and gave blacks the right to vote. Now, with the protection of federal troops to secure their voting rights, over 1,500 black politicians were elected all over the South, including senators and governors. And these politicians, they created public schools, they expanded health care, and they fought for jobs for both blacks and whites. Although these black politicians made groundbreaking changes, especially in public education, they faced unending backlash and death threats from ex-Confederates who couldn't stomach seeing their ex-slaves in positions of power. Their relentless opposition to black political power and the North's eventual capitulation led to the Compromise of 1877. The federal troops were withdrawn from the South, and the gains that blacks had made vanished. The Ku Klux Klan emerged as a terrorist organization against blacks, and the South replaced slavery with sharecropping, convict leasing, segregation, and racial terror. This ushered in what historians call the nadir. Nadir means the lowest point, rock bottom. This was the darkest period of American race relations, and it lasted from 1877 to at least 1940. Confederate myths spread across the country. The book, The Lost Cause, proclaimed that the Confederates were not traitors, but noble defenders of Southern heritage, fighting not for slavery, but for states' rights, despite Confederate leaders themselves explicitly stating that they were fighting to preserve slavery. The Lost Cause mythology claimed that slavery had been benevolent and had civilized black people. The South had fought for honor and tradition, not slavery, and Reconstruction was a failure because black people were incapable of governing. Now, this distorted history became the official version of the Civil War and Reconstruction in American schools, media, and popular culture. Generations of Americans were taught lies about black inferiority and incompetence. Historian Heather Cox Richardson argues that that's how the South won the Civil War. Even today, lost cause narratives persist, and the deep hatred against blacks by the Confederates has been passed down by their descendants from generation to generation. During the nadir, thousands of blacks were lynched without a trial. Black communities were attacked, and in cities like Tulsa, Wilmington, and Rosewood, black wealth was destroyed. Over 10,000 sundown towns emerged in the U.S., some right here in Wisconsin, where blacks and other people of color were banned from being in these all-white towns after sunset under threat of death. Most of the racial disparities we still struggle with today grew directly out of this dark period in our history. And that is why Juneteenth matters. The sanitized version of history we learned in school may have made us comfortable, but it has not prepared us to understand the truth we need to grasp in this historical moment. Juneteenth is not simply about the end of slavery. It is about the unfinished struggle for fairness. Juneteenth is not just the absence of chains, but the presence of justice. Juneteenth teaches us that freedom is not a gift laid at our feet. It is a fire that we carry, lit by mothers who sang lullabies to children they never see again, by men who built families from slave auctions. Yes, we've made progress. We have climbed mountains that our ancestors could only dream of. But history has taught us a brutal lesson. Our victories are tenuous, our gains reversible, our progress under constant threat of being swept away. That's why Juneteenth asks America a very difficult question. Will we continue supporting the Confederates' legacy of white supremacy, or will we finally build what Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community, a multiracial democracy? I wrote my book because I wanted people to know the truth. Our ancestors endured horrors beyond imagination. They were stripped of their names, their languages, their families, and their freedom. They survived the slave ships, the auction block, the lash, the lynching tree, and the long night of segregation. And yet they created. They resisted, they prayed, they dreamed of a future most never lived to see. But because they refused to give up, we are here today. Juneteenth reminds us that every generation must protect freedom, expand it, and pass it on. This is not just black history, it is American history. It is our shared story. What will we do with the freedom that others sacrificed so much to secure? May we have the courage to tell the truth, the wisdom to learn from the past, and the determination to build a future worthy of their sacrifice. May we press on, not just to remember the promise of Juneteenth, but to fulfill it. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. not because we're guaranteed victory, but because surrender is not an option. That's what Juneteenth means to me. Thank you very much. Do we have time for Q&A or not? Okay. I'll take a few questions if people have any.
What were the sundown towns in Wisconsin?
Well, if there were quite.
Can you repeat the question when they say?
Oh, okay. The question was, what were the sundown towns of Wisconsin? If somebody has a phone right now, if you look up sundown towns, they have a great Google. They have a great map of each state with a listing of the towns, and I'm trying to think of several. Yeah, Appleton was on that list, but there's at least 10 in Wisconsin. So, but if you look that up, you'll see the whole list. There's a database online. They're called sundown towns. Thanks for your question. Any other questions? And before I get to the next question, I want you all to know that this is my last speech. I am officially retiring today, so I really appreciate you coming out. So, thank you. And make sure you buy a book before I leave.
First off, thank you so much for this amazing history. I am very curious to know how long did it take you of your research to really unveil some moments of profound truth?
Well, I've been doing this research for at least 20 or 30 years, but this particular book took me 3 years of research and 9 months of writing. And everything I talked about today is in the book. And so it's in an expanded version, so you'll get a much fuller picture of what I talked about. Thank you for your question. Absolutely. It's on Amazon if you order that, or you can get it on my website cheaper, but it's an ebook on my website. But if you want the physical copy, you can go to Amazon for that.
And which building on campus did it involve?
Well, remember it's a novel, so it's fiction. But in my younger days, I used to take students on retreats. And so that's how the novel originated, based on my true experience with students across the country.
So you did not have any roots to some of the racial incidences that have occurred?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to, at least some of the students who read it felt that I was talking to them. And I don't care what camp, it could have been a campus in California or a campus in Mississippi. They felt the same way. Okay. All right, thank you again.
Again, another round of applause for Dr. Charles Chuck Taylor. And thank you for ending your speaking career with us. That was wonderful. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. As our program gets ready to come to a close, I do want to remind you at the end of this, we are going to have a book signing with Dr. Taylor. So if you do have some more questions, or if you want to take some pictures or spend some more moments with him, we are going to have that at the end of this program. Up next, we are going to have another musical selection from our songstress. Please welcome again, Michelle Bozeman Brown.
Again, Dr. Taylor, thank you. And like Brandon said, thank you for retiring with us. This is a good way to start our Juneteenth. Thank you. And your water is still here. I don't know about tomorrow. I just live from day to day, and I don't borrow from its sunshine, for its skies may turn to gray, and I don't worry about my future, for I know what Jesus said, and today He walks beside me, for He knows what lies ahead. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds my hand.